What's up? Oh! Get some. Boom.
One down. That's two. You make this.
Oh, yeah. Let's go. Oh, but he got it in. Oh, come on.
10 seconds.
Got him. Ooh. My dissertation, I interviewed people who won awards for their teaching in couple and family therapy programs about basically about what they do to facilitate meaningful learning experiences. And it was actually a lot of fun to do. It was really interesting. Oh, what a shot. I know this is going to be difficult to answer though, and I don't want to make this a political question. So are the children in those camps at greater risk to suffer from some form of abandonment issues due to being separated from family? And if so, is there any way to fix that? Like, what do you do for a child with abandonment issues? Yes, 100%. Okay, girl, 100%. Yeah, because you're talking literal separation from attachment figure, which is incredibly distressing for a child, and actually probably constitutes a trauma. And so the way that you work with that is you'd have to work with trauma, and the way you'd work with anybody who has childhood trauma. So when you forcefully take a person or a child away from their attachment figure, it's going to cause them significant distress. Yeah, I mean, abandonment issues are simply like, I mean, another word for that would be attachment issues, but yes, you could, all of a sudden, it might be hard for you to latch onto an attachment figure because you're afraid that that figure could be taken away. And so what you'd have to do is over time, you'd be working to basically re-facilitate an attachment with another figure. You'd have to realize that like your childhood trauma doesn't dictate what your current relational needs and connections are and like the way that you relate to others. But that's a long road because emotionally, especially if that happens when you're pre-verbal, whew, it's a long road. That speaks to the importance of representation. So if you have no frame of reference for the way that therapy works or the way that like mental illness works, and then the only exposure you have to it is Dr. Phil, you have no other frame of reference, so you would believe that that's what therapy is. And so why shows like Dr. Phil are dangerous is because that's inaccurate representation of therapy and of mental health. And when you have inaccurate representation of therapy and mental health, and that's the only thing that's in people's living rooms, it's the only exposure that people have to therapy and mental health, that's what people think it is. And so sometimes my job is having to tell people, is trying to help people realize that that is not what it is. And part of why I even created this stream is because I wanted to destigmatize therapy and mental health. I wanted to help people see that therapy is something that's accessible. We're not all like people like Dr. Phil. Like, it's just, it speaks so much to the importance of representation. There needs to be accurate representation of therapists, of therapy, of mental health, of mental illness, mental health treatment. I think there's kind of a culture shift around therapy right now as therapy becomes more like out there and it becomes less stigmatized to see a therapist. I think more people want their therapist to be relatable to them, and if that means younger, it means younger. So for me, I think that works out really well. It is true though that often as you get older as a therapist, people tend to take you a little bit more seriously, and you tend to be considered to be a little bit more legitimate, for better or worse. But but it does have an effect. People want their therapist to have either a certain level of life experience, or they like to be able to connect with them on age. Sometimes people will come to a younger therapist even if they're older because they want new blood and energy. So, but I do think generationally there's kind of a shift right now with like millennials really wanting to have like a younger, more relatable therapist. Oh, give me that 14. Where is that 14? Oh, baby. I'm feeling it tonight, guys. I am absolutely feeling it tonight. Oh, no! Got him! Yeah! All right, hold on. It's my stream.
All right, we're good. We're on the plates. What an asshole. See? I'm actually narcissistic. I've hidden that up until this point. Fireteam Fridays is all about me. No. This is the Dr. Mick show.
Then maybe I'll make my own line. Is this Cave? Oh, Cave Johnson. Look at this handsome devil. He just looks so happy. Aww. Full disclosure, and this is the first time I've ever said this publicly. In second grade, I went to football camp, and I did vote for myself for Mr. Hustle. I really wanted that trophy, and I voted for myself. And I've never admitted that. Never. But I got Mr. Hustle. That guy. If I was that guy, I'd be so mad. Research is, particularly in psychology, like I kind of have beef with getting like published and with like doing research in general, because like the peer review process is kind of stupid. Like it basically amounts to like people wanting to be heard over people wanting to give meaningful feedback, at least in my experience of submitting stuff. So like what happens a lot of the time is like you could submit what is really like a good article, and like you know that you did a really nice job on it, you know that what you wrote is meaningful and that what you have here is something that can be useful, and then reviewers can decide, no, you know what, I want to make sure that my voice is heard rather than like even paying attention to the content, so I'm going to pick apart grammar, and I'm going to just kind of like say that I don't like that this says stuff that I don't think it should say, and all this nonsense. And it really makes it difficult sometimes to be doing social science research. And the other thing is there's a lot of pressure on researchers right now to put out research that is like interesting, and I think that causes a problem because not all research should be interesting. Research should be like it should just be useful, and sometimes we need research to confirm things instead of it just being that like, you know, oh, it's this sexy new finding that's like everybody's super jazzed about, like.
Had to move faster. Get him next time.
So that's a whole thing too. What happens is, as these things continue and become more consistent at regular and or irregular intervals, what starts to happen is people do the things that have been rewarded and they extinguish the things that have been punished. Behavior. A classic example of this is teenagers. Okay, when teenagers are in families, a lot of times what happens is teenagers don't want to spend as much time with their families. That's just kind of how it goes, right? So oftentimes a desirable behavior in the context of the family is like to spend time with a teenager. But what they do is they punish it when it happens. So an example of this would be a teenager comes downstairs and they come and sit at the dinner table and they actually join the family for dinner. And somebody sitting at the family table, at the dinner table says, "It's about time you came down. Jesus, we never see you. Oh my God." Or they start going crazy about like, "Well, tell us about how your day. It's really nice that you're finally down here. Where the hell have you been?" That's like not cool. That's punishing a desirable behavior. It's a lot of reconditioning. It's a lot of work around the emotion of OCD. So helping the person recognize their anxiety, helping them recognize that they have control. Like OCD sometimes it sits within a control fallacy of either I have all the control or I have none of it. And so it's helping a person who thinks they have none of the control realize that they do have it and helping them exert that. A person who thinks that they have all the control, helping them realize that they don't and celebrating the times when they don't. But then doing some behavioral modification around it by building some distress tolerance for the anxiety that they experience when they don't act on the impulse, because a lot of what happens is like when you have an intrusive thought, you have an OCD type of thought, it generally comes out as an impulse that a person feels compelled to act on. And so it's figuring out how to help a person either engage in an alternative behavior or to not do the behavior, because doing the behavior sometimes is an avoidance-seeking behavior. It's the avoidance of the anxiety. And so it's helping a person be anxious, but then make a decision about what they do instead, rather than acting upon the impulse. And I am proud to say, Titan, that I have quite a bit of success working with people with OCD and helping them overcome it. Sometimes I think being less harsh on oneself can sometimes be a matter of perspective. Ella, by learning a new skill, you are putting your brain into a jam. You're basically making your brain have to learn a new skill, and our brain doesn't like doing that because it's difficult and dissonant, and there are times where, you know, learning a skill, it causes anxiety inherently because we're having to accommodate in all sorts of ways, and our brain does not like to do that. So just know that your frustration is not because of a personality flaw, it's because that's just kind of how our brains work. Okay, so that first and foremost.
You're familiar with this place.
But in terms of being less harsh on yourself, to not do something or to say that you're not going to do something is not always useful because it doesn't tell you what to do instead. So you might, like, oftentimes what I'll help people do is practice replacing their negative self-talk or self-blaming self-talk with compassionate self-talk. So being able to say something like, this is a new skill and I'm trying really hard. Looking for data where you are doing well. So I hit that note this time. And even if you miss 7 other notes, focus on the note that you did hit. That kind of thing. So I'm a big believer in that kind of stuff, Ella. And realizing that, like, it's a big deal when you go to learn a new skill, and it's not easy to do that. And so if you're harsh on yourself, all it's going to do is compound the frustration and the difficulty of it, because we have the ability mentally to create the context under which we do things, if that makes any sense at all. And so you can use your mentality as a way to set yourself up for a context that's going to be supportive of your learning a new skill. And you actually have the ability to do that. We all have the ability to do that for ourselves, which is really cool. But it's also a skill that has to be practiced. So one thing that I could also argue, and I do this a lot when I work with performance, because one of the things I specialize in is performance issues and performance anxiety, is you have to practice a mentality in addition to practicing the actual skill that you're doing. You can't just assume that your mental space is going to be fine and only practice the actual behavioral skill. If that makes sense.
I'm making the elimination.
Oh, God.
I deserve to be told that I'm bad at this right now. Come here. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4. How is that 6? I don't understand how that's 6. How on earth?
You count the ones on the top row first, left to right, and then the bottom 2 are 5 and 6.
Oh. Okay, well now I get it. Why didn't you just say that?
I would have made it.
Come on, guys, you gotta communicate, all right? All right, wait, 1, 2, 3, 4. No!
My right, yeah, you got it. Yeah, there you go.
Have you ever considered using your psychological skills for evil?